Welcome, everybody, back to the Care Advocates, where we're advocating for you. Today, we are joined by Debbie Compton. Debbie is one of the authors of the new book, The Caregivers Advocate, Volume 2. This is a second book in the series, and we'd like to welcome Debbie. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host and esteemed colleague, Dr. George Ackerman, who also is one of the authors of the new book. Welcome, Debbie. How are you?
Thank you for having me, Lance. I appreciate the opportunity. And George, thank you so much. I am doing great. Always excited to share with folks.
Wonderful. Well, Debbie, for those who may not be familiar with you or, who you are, what your background is, why don't you take a moment and just give a brief introduction?
Well, I am a certified caregiving consultant and certified caregiver advocate. I volunteer for the Alzheimer's Association since 2017. Also work with the Oklahoma Healthy Brain Initiative. So I do a lot of different things. I didn't start out to be a caregiver. I was in business, traveling nationwide, but my parents, my dad had Parkinson's, my mom had vascular dementia, and then my mother-in-law got Alzheimer's. So seemingly overnight, I became a full-time caregiver. And I learned many lessons in the process of going through that I wish I would have known sooner. And so that is the catalyst for me starting my business, The Purple Vine. And everything that I do now is in support of caregivers and teaching them actionable, useful information to make their lives easier, safer, less stressful.
Wonderful. Well, let's start there, Debbie. Oftentimes caregivers don't know what they're getting into until they're in it. And that's one of the reasons for writing my book. I didn't know what being a family caregiver was all about, didn't even identify as a family caregiver when I had helped take care of my father for 2.5 years. But once you're inside it, I like to say it's kind of like the boiling frog analogy. We used to talk about this in science class all the time. That frog, you put it in a boiling pot of water, it's jumping out as fast as it can. But if you put the frog in while the water's still lukewarm and you slowly turn it to a boil, the frog never identifies that it's now boiling, therefore it never jumps out. And I feel like that's how caregiving is.
Exactly.
What did you find was really some of the biggest hurdles or obstacles or challenges you faced when you first entered into that caregiving role?
Well, I first off, that analogy is perfect because I also did not identify as a caregiver, even though I was taking care of mom and dad both, and then later supporting my mother-in-law. I was just a daughter doing what a daughter should do. That's it. Did not identify with the term caregiver at all. I I had never even been around anyone who had Parkinson's before, so I didn't know anything in the world about it. And I had no clue what to do when dad started having hallucinations. So I did tons of research. I looked, I read everything I could get my hands on. I talked to doctors and neurologists and everything, trying to learn as fast as possible because you have to hit the ground running as a caregiver and no one prepares you for it. And there's such a wide variety of information that you need to have that you don't. And so it was very frustrating for me because, as an example, I said with dad, all I could find was don't argue with him.
Mm.
Okay, that's a great starting point, but that's not enough. I wanted, how can I reduce the occurrence of this? Is there anything that I can do to stop it from happening? What are real things that I can do? And I couldn't find that information. And that's just one example. That situations like that happened over and over. And so again, that's what really motivated me because it was so hard for me. That was the hardest job that I never applied for that I've ever done in my life. And so I want to make it easier for those coming behind me and teach them things that I wish I would have known because it would have made my life so much easier. And when I was getting my certifications, I learned things that would have been tremendously helpful, but nobody teaches you this, and I couldn't find it out there anywhere. So that is exactly why hallucinations, delusions, very tough. Wandering in the middle of the night, very tough. And so my husband and I had to create specialized solutions that would work for us because the things on the market that were there did not work for us. So you have to be super creative. But the challenge you have in that is that you can't be creative when you're stressed out.
Right.
And have you ever met a peaceful and calm caregiver? I haven't.
Unfortunately, as Debbie's speaking, it kind of brings me back to the same, scenario and situation we went through in our family, and that's why, again, a lot of the things you do, work you do, and we'll talk shortly about is important because you're bringing not just awareness to various fields, but specifically Parkinson's disease, which, as Lance knows too well, is what our family and journey I went through. But now today, as an advocate, a lot of the things you say kind of hit me in the heart in a way, in a positive way, because I felt I was the only one going through caring for my mother with the hallucinations and delusions. And although everyone doesn't have those during Parkinson, those sometimes are more frightening than Parkinson's itself.
Yeah.
Very scary. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Debbie, before I get to my next question, I just want to zero in on something you said because, this is a show about advocating and advocacy and advocates, and, you're doing all three of those things. What are some of the things you said that were on the market that didn't work? I'm not necessarily worried about that, but you said you and your husband then had to kind of be reinventing things to fit your situation. That might be things that could help our viewers and listeners. What are some of the examples of that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, on the market, you find when you have a wanderer, they suggest that you put a latch up high on the door. And that certainly did not work for us because my mother-in-law pushed a chair over and climbed up on the chair to undo the latch. Then you're facing broken hip and all the other things that can happen. So that was a no-go for us. That didn't work. What you have to do is to look at your person because my mom and my mother-in-law, both with different forms of dementia, reacted differently and they had where their eyes went was different. My mother-in-law would always look like eye level and above all the time. That's where she looked. My mother always looked eye level and below. She was always looking at the floor, picking things up off the floor, all those kind of things. And so that's why I work with caregivers to learn first about their person so that you can get a fix that will help them specifically. In my mother-in-law's case, what we wound up doing after trying the latch, the thing over the door, the doorknob so that you can't turn it. She figured that out. She had no problem with that. And several of the other deals that we tried, what we wound up doing was, those flip down door stops. It's a metal door stop with a rubber tip on it that you flip down. It's designed to hold a door open. Well, guess what? It will also hold a door shut. So we put it on the inside of our front door. And that way I could flip it down with my foot without ever leaning down to draw her attention to it. I could just flip it down with my foot and that door is not going to open. It is shut. And so that's the thing that we used for her to keep her safe because, you wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning when you hear the little chime going off at the front door, knowing she's headed out the door, maybe dressed, maybe not. We had both situations. So you need something to stop that door from opening altogether. And that's what worked for us.
Nice. And we were talking, when we first introduced you and, George as well, this new book has come out that you guys have published. You had, aside from yourself and George, there's 20 other experts from over 4 different countries for the care advocates. What is it about these experts? How did you identify them? How did you locate them? What was the process like?
It was a God thing. That's the bottom line, because I'm a Christian and I prayed and prayed about it, and I prayed that God would send me to the right people, and I have a lot of connections on LinkedIn, and so I just started looking at people, started reading some of the things that they posted. Also, I knew that I did not want it to be just contained to the United States because dementia is a worldwide problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to be so arrogant as to think that we have the only solutions. And my thought process was they might be doing something in Israel that we don't know about here. Maybe they're doing something in the UK that we don't know about. What about Canada? And so from those countries, then I picked people who are experts in their fields, in a field that pertained to some form of dementia or caregiving, and then brought them all together, interviewed each one, found their passion. Because when people write about their passion, it truly comes through. And when it's something that they really care about, because, you're like me, you could probably talk about 100 different subjects, and George as well. but what are you passionate about? And so each person, and my stipulation in that too is tell a little about your story and then give us a lot about strategy, tools, things that caregivers can do to improve their lives. That's the entire focus. It's not a book on fluff. The Caregiver's Advocate went international, just blew up off the charts. And that's when I realized, oh my goodness, there's a huge need for this. Because I thought there's probably a need. There's a huge need. And it stands to reason because the biggest risk factor for developing Alzheimer's is old age, and we're living longer. So our odds are increasing, and the baby boomers are aging. So we have more and more people becoming caregivers every single day, and they don't know what they're doing. They don't know, and not to be condescending, I didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
No one prepares you for it. So the Caregiver's Advocate, Volume 1 and 2, both international bestsellers, because they're not a repeat of each other. They're totally different, totally standalone books, because there are so many topics that caregivers need information on.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have plans to do a third?
I think it's going to be coming, absolutely, because I've already had several people say, well, why didn't you ask me? Well, the book can only be so big,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean,
And
it could be a
so yeah,
series and,
probably.
a trilogy or, have just a whole
Yeah.
volume to it. That's incredible, Debbie. Well, I want to toss it over to George and you guys can continue the conversation and we appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Welcome again to the show, even though we talk all the time and I consider you family. I remember when the first book came out and we didn't know each other, but we kind of talked. And the beautiful thing about it was some of the people who wrote in the first book became, again, like my family in the fight
Yes.
toward the cure. And it's not just about Parkinson's, it's about all diseases. As you mentioned actually earlier, a lot of people might not be aware, and I wasn't until 2 years after my mother passed, that 10 million people around the world are battling Parkinson's disease. So imagine the other, illnesses, disorders, and diseases. So it is important to include authors around the world. So that's what I really liked, and I will be a little bit odd and show it here. So it's
I love it. I love it.
not just on your shelf; it's on ours too. But what are some of the areas that you kind of thought weren't touched on in 1 and 2 that you might want, included? Because I know law wasn't in book 1. And when you approached me to concentrate on that, I was excited because I actually just published a book on the law and Parkinson, but I don't see anyone talking about the laws or
Right.
end of life. I know it's a tough topic, but it's something that we all likely went through. And I find that although it was a tough time when my mother was struggling and passed, in a way she was a saint because she was able and she wanted to. Unlike other people in my family, I won't say who, my father, but my mother, she sat there, and when she was still okay or doing well before it progressed, we planned for a power of attorney. I hired an attorney, even though I am an attorney, to do the will. We spoke about every issue that could be imaginable, even some that weren't, and prepared. And that's what I think this book, I call it a tool in a way. Hope you approve of that. But because there's people out there with any illness, disease, caregivers, friends, family that are just sitting there in the moment and they can't handle the dealing with your loved one and then these other things, so they brush those things off. But now, looking back, they wish they didn't. But now we can get this out there to everyone who can now realize that they don't want to go through some of the tougher times that we all did. And I can tell you now, it's not easy with my father. He doesn't have Parkinson's. Right. He has other issues, but kidney. But he won't plan. He refuses all the things. And honestly, I don't even know if he passed tomorrow, if we would be able to attend a funeral because we don't have one planned.
Well, and you bring up a really good point because this is not just for dementia. In the first book, we have a father who's talking about a terminally ill child. We also have a wife whose husband passed away in the process of writing the book, and he had had a stroke. And he had aphasia and was having lots of issues. And so I told her at that point, I'm like, if you want to pull out, that's fine. It's absolutely okay. And she said, no, I need to do this to honor him. And I think it will be great healing for me. And that's what I've heard from multiple authors in both books, is that writing about their journey and sharing with other people and sharing the things that they learned was very healing for them. And it helped them find purpose in the process. We all want to know, why am I going through this? What's happening? There's always a purpose. There's always a reason. And I kind of was the same way, with my mom had vascular dementia for 21 years, and it was a very long journey. But she was happy, and she was very high functioning for a lot of the journey, so that made it easier. She was the first of my parents to be diagnosed and the last one to pass away. So in the process of that, my dad developed Parkinson's and passed away in 7 years. My mother-in-law developed Alzheimer's and passed away in 8 years. So you don't know how long your journey is going to be. You don't know the extent that your person is going to experience because, as you alluded to earlier, not everyone has hallucinations and delusions. Both mine did. My mother-in-law and my dad did. My mom, not so much. She probably did a tiny little bit, but I mean, she was she was really kind of funny and goofy anyway, so it was hard to tell. So I don't know. But you learn something every time, and being able to share what you learned just gives it purpose and gives it meaning. And that's what makes me feel so good is hearing people. I mean, we've got doctors who have written in and said they learned from reading our book. And in the Caregivers Advocate Volume 2, we have 3 doctors, yourself included, who wrote a chapter in the book. And so when you got 3 doctors, you've got several nurses, consultants, advocates, we got everything under the sun. Death doula, elder law attorney, you name it, they're in there because people have a different perspective. And to me, that's what makes the book so powerful is because you're not just reading one person's perspective, you're hearing 22 different people's perspective, and you're getting contact information for each and every one of those people at the end of their chapter. Anyone reading it, as soon as they finish reading your chapter, George, they're going to see how to get in touch with you, how your website, your podcast, they're going to see those links to all that stuff. That in itself is such valuable information for people.
Well, we send our love and support to you and your whole family. In a way, like you said, through religion, we might have been brought together and the whole world because of the purpose. And unfortunately, out of some of the tougher times for all 3 of us and everyone listening, comes some positive. And knowing you is,
Yes.
of course, Lance. I always say I love the show. It's not scripted, and I get to spend time with Lance and our amazing guests. But kind of hit on as we wrap up the topic I was going to shift to next, which is journeys. I named one of my books Journeys because I don't think I'd be able to function, to be honest, today, even in the show or as, without people like Lance and you in my life. And that's why I continue. Unfortunately, none of us can bring back our loved ones, but can make sure that others don't feel alone and that no one goes through what our family members have. So, you kind of hit on it, but, talking about journeys, are there journeys or topics, going forward that you haven't seen? Or, I wrote a few books I didn't want to. I never planned like you to write books, but found there were some topics like policing and Parkinson's that no one in the world, for some odd reason, that's part of the problem, are not talking about. Is there a journey, even one or some topic you feel now that you're, through to the future that you might want to see in it? And if maybe someone listening will reach out and want to write that.
Oh, there are so many. Absolutely. Because as you know, it's so multifaceted. And then it also depends on your person because my dad and I had a different relationship than my mom and I. We also had a different relationship than my mother-in-law and I did. And so you've got all those intricacies going on too. But yes, there are so many things we haven't really dealt with hallucinations and delusions. We dealt a little bit with wandering, but not enough because it's a huge issue. Taking away their keys when they need to stop driving. We had just a little, we've touched on things, but there's so much more. And even when it's a topic that someone has written about, they have a different perspective quite often than someone else. And so even if you and I were to write about the same topic, it's not going to sound like the same thing, and we're not going to give the same advice. Some of it maybe, but we don't duplicate in any book. It's all different things. But I also listen to the people who call and who tell me, that they're interested in participating in a book because I talk with them. And when you talk and when you really listen to what they're talking about, you'll hear the heart message. And that heart message, that perspective can be different when also when alcoholism is involved. And you've had an alcoholic, possibly abusive parent, and suddenly you're the caregiver of that person. That's hard. I know people on that journey because I do consultations for caregivers and one-on-one Zoom support where they can call me from the comfort of their own home. Don't have to worry about getting your loved one out and about or anything like that. And we chat on Zoom. And then I help them find a solution that works for them in their particular situation with their relationship in mind. And like I said, there's just so many factors in it, but there are lots of topics still to come that we have not addressed. And if anybody's interested in writing a chapter, they can email me, deb@thepurplevine.com, and I'll get you some information because I'm sure there is a volume 3. Like I said, I've had so many people reaching out and interested in it and wanting to share their story. And I want that to be a healing process for them as we've all experienced by sharing.
I always say after the lights, camera, and paparazzi leave the show today, the conversation has to continue because these are, as you said, so many more to come. And I have a story I'll do quick, but my mother, I'm a police officer in reserve now, and my mother was always honest and friendly and never lied my whole life to me. So when she had delusions, hallucinations, I believed that everyone was hurting her, like the AIDS. And so I didn't know what to do. So as an officer, we decided to completely fill the home with video cameras, obviously not in the private areas, but just to make sure. And that's why I don't think I would have. And again, everything reasonable with a home, but I wanted to be able to, in a way, watch over and make sure she was safe. And
Oh,
thankfully,
yeah.
I did catch someone neglecting her, which was shocking. But we went through it's a different show. We went through like literally almost 78, 7 companies. And finally, towards the end, we found 2 beautiful souls. But it's just some of these things even I think they need to be movies one because it's so shocking to read. So really want to thank
Yes.
you again for your work time, and I'm going to
Thank
send
you.
it back to my co-host Lance.
Oh, thank you, George. And Debbie, again, thank you for joining us today here on the Care Advocates. Why don't you give your website one more time for viewers and listeners, and we'll also have it in the show notes as well.
Right. They can go to thepurplevine.com where you'll find a blog, you'll find resources. Thank you, George. You'll find you can sign up on my email list because I only email one time a week. I know that caregivers do not have time to read multiple emails. I know where you are. I understand. So I try to operate accordingly.
Perfect. And can they get the book on your website, George's website, Amazon, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, all 3. Yes.
Perfect.
It is available. If you order directly from myself or from George, then we will sign the copy and send it to you. If you order on Amazon, obviously we can't sign it, but you can come out to some place where we are speaking or anything, and we love talking to caregivers and love supporting, as I know you do too, Lance.
Yes, thank you. Well, I gotta say though, you guys, I bought my copy on Amazon the day it was released. Nobody told me
Thank
that I
you.
could get an autographed copy from either of you, so
Several.
I'm sending it back. But anyway,
Oh, buy another one.
Yeah, that's good.
well, thank you, Debbie. Thank you for all the work and advocacy you're doing. I guess we'll stay tuned for the Care Advocates Volume 3 since you put it out there. And George, always a pleasure to see you, my friend.
Yeah, thanks everyone. The only thing I want to leave with is, no one's alone. I'm actually have the honor with the Michael J. Fox Foundation this Tuesday and Wednesday. I'll be at the Capitol advocating for funding for the NIH and to find a cure for Parkinson, but with I think 200 other individuals throughout the country. So in Washington D.C., it's going to be hectic, fun, exciting, and some I feel once in a lifetime. So excited to talk about that too, Lance, the next episode.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yes, absolutely. I know our trip this summer when we were invited to the Capitol for the Elizabeth Dole Foundation and got to film that and interview the senators and all kinds of wonderful people just doing tremendous work. I know you'll have a great time and look forward to hearing about it.
Thanks.
Thanks, you guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us again here at the Care Advocates, where we're advocating for you. We look forward to seeing you again here next month.